You've probably felt it before. That creeping suspicion late at night, or in some quiet moment when you're alone with your thoughts. The idea that nothing really matters, that all your striving, your pain, your hopes, they're just noise in an indifferent universe. And maybe you even said it out loud. Nothing means anything. It felt honest. It felt like you were finally seeing through the illusion everyone else was still caught in. But here's what no one tells you. That feeling, that cold clarity you mistook for truth, it might be the most sophisticated lie your mind has ever constructed. And no, I'm not here to sell you comfort or hand you some easy answer. Carl Jung understood something that most people miss entirely. Nihilism isn't the end of a philosophical journey. It's a symptom, a signal, a mask your unconscious wears when something inside you is trying to die so that something else can finally be born. Today, I want to show you what's really happening beneath that sense of meaninglessness and why the emptiness you feel might be the beginning of the most important transformation of your life. So stay with me, because if you've ever wondered whether your despair was telling you the truth, you might discover today that it was actually asking you a question you haven't yet learned how to hear. Have you ever noticed how nihilism arrives? It rarely announces itself. It seeps in slowly, like cold water rising around your ankles. One day you're going through the motions, work, relationships, ambitions, and somewhere along the way, the color drains out. The things that once excited you feel hollow. The goals that once pulled you forward now seem arbitrary. And eventually a thought crystallizes. Why bother? Most people assume this is depression, or burnout, or just the inevitable cynicism of getting older. But Jung saw something far more interesting happening beneath the surface. He recognized that when meaning collapses, it is often because an old meaning has outlived its purpose. The psyche is not breaking down, it is breaking open. Jung called this process enantiodromia, the principle that everything, when pushed to its extreme, transforms into its opposite. Light becomes dark, certainty becomes doubt, and meaning, when it has been built on foundations that no longer serve you, must collapse into meaninglessness before something truer can emerge. So when you feel that nothing matters, your unconscious might be telling you something very specific. The things you thought mattered were never really yours to begin with. They were borrowed, inherited, imposed, and now your soul is clearing the ground. Think about where your sense of meaning came from. For most of us, it was handed down before we had any say in the matter. Our parents told us what mattered. Our culture told us what success looked like. Our religions, or lack of them, told us what life was for, and we absorbed it all, not because it was true, but because we were young and needed a map to navigate the world. Jung called this the first half of life, the period where we build the ego, establish an identity, find our place in society. We adopt roles, we wear masks, we construct a self that can function, that can be loved, that can achieve. And for a while it works. The meaning feels real because we've never questioned it. But something happens, usually around the middle of life, though it can come earlier for those who suffer or think deeply. The roles start to feel like costumes. The achievements ring hollow. The God you believed in or the atheism you clung to stops providing the comfort it once did. And you find yourself staring into a void that seems to swallow everything you once held dear. This is the moment most people mistake for the end. They conclude that meaning was always an illusion, that hope is for the naive, that the only honest response to existence is a shrug. But Jung would say you are standing at a threshold, not a dead end. The meaninglessness you feel is not the truth about life. It is the death of a life that was never fully yours. Jung wrote extensively about what he called the shadow, those parts of ourselves we have rejected, denied, hidden away because they didn't fit the image we wanted to project. The shadow contains our shame, our rage, our forbidden desires. But it also contains something else, our unlived life, the dreams we abandoned, the passions we suppressed, the truths we were too afraid to speak. When nihilism descends, it often signals that the shadow has grown too large to ignore. All those rejected pieces of yourself are pressing against the walls of your carefully constructed identity, demanding to be seen. And because you have no framework for integrating them, because you have spent years pretending they don't exist, they announce themselves as emptiness, as apathy, as the conviction that nothing is real. But here is the secret Jung discovered through decades of working with the human soul. The void is not empty. It is full of everything you have refused to become. The meaninglessness is not the absence of meaning. It is the presence of meaning you have not yet claimed. This is why nihilism feels so convincing. It carries the weight of truth because it does contain a truth. The life you have been living is a partial life, a life built on half of who you are, and partial lives eventually demand to be made whole. There is a particular kind of suffering that comes from living against your own nature. Jung saw it in patient after patient, successful people, respected people, people who had done everything right by the world's standards, and yet they sat in his office hollow, exhausted, wondering why they felt so dead inside. He realized that the psyche has its own demands, its own trajectory, its own idea of what your life should be. And when you ignore this inner calling for too long, when you build your entire existence around external expectations, the soul begins to withdraw its energy. What once gave you pleasure stops working. What once motivated you falls flat, and eventually you find yourself unable to believe in anything at all. This is not philosophical nihilism. This is psychological starvation. Your soul is not telling you that meaning doesn't exist. It is telling you that it has been starved of the meaning it actually needs. Jung put it directly. The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it. And what he meant was that meaning is not found in achievements or possessions or status. It is found in alignment between who you are and how you live, between your deepest nature and your daily choices. When that alignment breaks, meaninglessness floods in, not because the universe is empty, but because you have emptied yourself. So, what do you do when you find yourself in the grip of this emptiness? The first thing Jung would tell you is, do not run from it. Do not numb it with distractions. Do not paper over it with positive thinking or busy yourself into exhaustion just to avoid the feeling. The void is not your enemy, it is a doorway. Jung believed that the unconscious speaks to us constantly, through dreams, through symptoms, through moods and inexplicable feelings. And when meaninglessness arrives, it is the unconscious speaking loudly, saying, the old way is finished. It is time to go deeper. This is the beginning of what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you were always meant to be, beneath the masks, beneath the roles, beneath the borrowed beliefs. Individuation does not happen in comfort. It happens in crisis. It happens when everything you thought you knew falls away and you are left standing naked before the mystery of your own existence. The nihilist stops here. They see the fallen structures and conclude that nothing can be built. But the person who understands what Jung understood sees the same ruins and recognizes them as the necessary clearing. The old house had to come down. It was built for someone you no longer are. Jung often spoke of meaning not as something you find, but as something you create in dialogue with the unconscious. It is not handed to you from outside. It is not waiting in a book or a philosophy or a religion. It emerges from the living relationship between your conscious mind and the depths within you. This is why nihilism is ultimately a failure of courage. It takes the real experience of meaninglessness, which is valid, which is important, which is trying to tell you something, and it stops there. It refuses the next step. It mistakes the death of old meaning for the impossibility of any meaning at all. But Jung spent his entire life demonstrating that the psyche is not nihilistic. The unconscious is constantly producing symbols, dreams, images, longings. It is constantly trying to guide you toward wholeness. The very fact that you can feel the absence of meaning so acutely is proof that your soul knows what meaning is and is demanding that you find the real thing. As Jung wrote, "The word meaningless is meaningless to me." And he did not mean this as clever wordplay. He meant that meaninglessness itself is a meaning, a message, a symptom, a cry from the depths that cannot be ignored. There is an archetype that Jung returned to again and again when discussing this process of descent and renewal. He called it the night sea journey, the mythic voyage into darkness that heroes in every culture must undertake before they can return transformed. Think of Jonah in the belly of the whale. Think of Christ in the tomb. Think of Persephone in the underworld. These are not just stories. They are maps of the human soul, describing what happens when we are swallowed by darkness and must find our way through to the other side. The nihilistic phase is your night sea journey. You have been swallowed. The light you once navigated by has gone out. And everything in you wants to panic, to thrash, to declare that light never existed in the first place. But the ancient stories all agree on one thing: the journey through darkness is not optional. It is not a mistake. It is the only path to genuine transformation. You cannot become who you are meant to be by staying on the surface, by clinging to the old meanings, by refusing the descent. And here is the promise that Jung found confirmed in myth after myth, patient after patient, and in his own long journey through the unconscious. Those who endure the darkness, those who do not turn back, those who let the old self die completely, they emerge carrying something new, a meaning that is their own, a life that finally fits. Perhaps you are in that darkness right now. Perhaps you have been there for months or years. Perhaps you have grown so accustomed to the emptiness that you have forgotten there was ever anything else. If so, I want to tell you what Jung would tell you. Your suffering is not meaningless. It is not a sign that you have seen through some cosmic joke. It is the pain of transformation, the agony of becoming, the necessary burning away of everything that was false, so that something true can finally emerge. The nihilism you feel is not the final truth. It is the guardian at the gate testing whether you have the courage to go deeper. And if you do, if you can sit with the emptiness without running, if you can ask what it is trying to show you, if you can follow the thread of your own authentic longing rather than the borrowed meanings that have failed you, you will discover that the void was never empty at all. It was full of you. The you that you have never met. The you that has been waiting in the darkness, patient, ancient, ready to be born. Jung lived this truth himself. In his late 30s, after breaking with Freud and losing the certainty that had structured his life, he descended into what he later called a confrontation with the unconscious. For years he allowed himself to be overtaken by dreams, visions, and psychological experiences that would have driven a lesser person to madness. He did not know if he would survive it. He did not know what waited on the other side. But he trusted that the psyche knew what it was doing, that the collapse of meaning was not the end, but a transition, that something was being prepared in the depths that his conscious mind could not yet comprehend. What emerged from those years was the entire body of work we now call Jungian psychology. The concepts of the shadow, the anima, the self, the archetypes, all of it came from his willingness to descend into the meaninglessness and stay there until it revealed its secrets. He wrote in his Red Book, "The way is not without danger. Everything good is costly, and the development of personality is one of the most costly of all things." The meaninglessness you feel is part of that cost. It is the price of transformation, and it is worth paying. So where does this leave you? Perhaps with a different relationship to your own emptiness. Perhaps with a first flicker of recognition that what you called nihilism was actually an invitation. Jung would not tell you to believe in anything. He was not interested in replacing one set of borrowed convictions with another. He would only ask you to take your own experience seriously, including the experience of meaninglessness, to treat it not as a conclusion but as a question, to ask, what in me has died? What is trying to be born? What am I refusing to see? The answers will not come from outside. They will not come from philosophy or argument or this video. They will come from the slow, patient work of listening to your own depths, from paying attention to your dreams, your longings, your strange attractions and repulsions, from following the thread that is yours alone. And if you do this, if you treat your meaninglessness as a doorway rather than a wall, you may find that it opens onto a landscape you never knew existed, a life that is genuinely yours, a meaning that no one else can give you or take away. We have reached the end of this exploration, but for you, something may just be beginning. The recognition that your emptiness is not the truth about reality, but a truth about where you are in your own unfolding. The sense that beneath the nihilism, something is stirring, waiting, asking to be met. Jung spent his life showing that the human soul is not random, not meaningless, not a cosmic accident. It has depth and purpose and direction. It knows things the conscious mind has forgotten. And it is always, always trying to guide you toward wholeness, even when that guidance feels like despair. So the next time that cold voice whispers that nothing matters, consider this. Something in you cares enough to suffer about meaning. Something in you is outraged by emptiness, refuses to accept it, keeps asking why. That something is not foolish or naive. It is the deepest part of you, the part that knows what you are for, the part that will not rest until you find it. The nihilism was never the truth. It was the labor pain. It was the necessary darkness before the dawn. And if you can hold on, if you can trust the process even when you cannot see where it leads, you may discover that the meaning you were searching for was never out there at all. It was in here, waiting in the depths, waiting for you to finally descend far enough to find it. And when you do, the emptiness will not disappear. It will transform. It will become space, sacred space, generative space, the space in which your real life can finally begin.